There is a specific strain of online discourse that loves to study the rich and how they got that way. And often it involves a certain projection onto wealthy people, cosplaying poverty or engaging in other quirky behavior that we zero in on and assume it must be some trade secret of the billionaire class. We love to examine and highlight the ultra-frugal or otherwise extreme habits of wealthy people and imply a causal relationship between the habit and their money where it's not clear that one actually exists. The implicit suggestion is that mimicking the behavior of ultra-wealthy people will net the same outcome for the mimicker. We're talking about headlines like, "Here's how 9 billionaires start their mornings," and 8 ways rich people view the world differently from the average person. This stuff is everywhere in business and financial media, but has it always been this way? Let's back up a few decades, because in the age of the robber barons, think Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, JP Morgan, the billionaire boys, we did not admire the billionaires. We didn't study their morning routines, and back then there was more of a cultural understanding that the extreme haves, the 1% of the 1%, often had at the direct expense of the have-nots. But somewhere along the way, over the last 50 years or so, that has shifted. Instead, we decided we might get further ahead if we just learned a little bit more about how the rich among us got all that money. And on its face, seems like a logical enough conclusion. Shouldn't imitating the habits of already wealthy people net the same results for us? Perhaps all the worship and admiration stems from the fundamental belief in a mostly meritocratic world, that most rich people did it themselves, and that replicating their behavior will produce a similar result. They must know some secret, right? But let's dig into where this belief comes from, because there's usually one statistic that gets thrown around when we talk about meritocracy, that most millionaires are self-made. We love a self-made personal narrative. So the claim that is in question today is the 88% of all millionaires are self-made statistic. It seems to originate in a 2017 Fidelity Investments study that is referenced around the web. But when I tried to find the original study in question so I could look into the basis and methodology used to substantiate the claim, it didn't seem to exist. I enlisted the help of my pro fact-check editor, Kate, to track it down, and she was able to locate a PDF of a Fidelity slide deck buried somewhere in a press release from 2021 that claims on slide 34 that 81% of millionaires they surveyed self-reported that their wealth was entirely earned alone. Only 19% checked the box for inherited or increased by others. We dug into the appendix where the methodology was outlined, and they surveyed 1,429, quote, affluent investors with assets ranging from $50,000 to $10 million. And the results were that 81% of the millionaires in the sample claimed they were self-made. Now, the issue with a small sample size of self-report data on this topic specifically is probably obvious, especially because of the innate biases and perspectives that we have about our own lives and success. Many of these types of sources claim that most people become wealthy without practically any of the tailwinds you would need. No inheritances, no six-figure income, no debt. And Houston, the math is not mathing. No leverage, no six-figure income, and no inheritance. Are all of the survey respondents 70 years old? Because without any of those advantages with our current cost of living, I'm not sure how this is mathematically possible outside of a 50-year investing timeline. But let's suspend statistical disbelief, even if we were to take this claim at face value that only 12% of millionaires inherited anything. The claim itself needs to be unpacked, because even a small inheritance isn't the only thing worth examining here. For example, I've never inherited anything, but that would be a gross oversimplification of the financial benefits that began accruing to me at a young age in the form of financial investment from my parents. It begs the question, what's really the difference? I didn't have student loan debt. My parents gave me my first car, and they funded my lifestyle until I graduated from college. Not to mention the generosity of a friend's family who allowed me to live with them and raid their pantry for free for the first several months when I began working so I could save. Sure, I worked hard at flapping my wings. I made mostly good decisions, but there was still a fair amount of wind beneath them, courtesy of other people in my family and my community. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're all working with the resources we have available to us, right? But it doesn't seem fair to claim self-made status when someone else bankrolled the first 20 years of your existence, does it? So it begs the question, what's a fair amount of permissible help, and when does your success become contingent upon it? Is it even possible to accurately apportion certain parts of your success to luck and other parts to work? Or does it all kind of compound together in an inextricable, soupy mess? It also introduces a slippery slope of, well, then what does count? And that's precisely my point. The millions of decisions and lucky breaks and opportunities that accumulate to form an individual life are far too varied and random to produce some reliably replicable path to great riches. For example, Bill Gates went to the Lakeside School in Seattle, supposedly one of only a handful of high schools in the entire world that had computers at the time.
We're writing huge, complex programs in BASIC.
It's estimated that only 300 high school students worldwide had access to computers at the time Gates was in high school. That is a literal 1 in a million start for Gates. And he admits as much. He says, quote, "If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft." He told that to the school's graduating class in 2005. And there's no alternate reality wherein Bill Gates went to a public high school in Cincinnati and didn't get exposed to computers until he was 25. We just can't know what would have happened otherwise. Now, does that mean one shouldn't try? Absolutely not. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation, right? It just means that attributing substantial outcomes to any one individual variable is not possible. Enormous outcomes are the culmination of a lot of factors coalescing in a very specific way. But we tend to only focus on one: effort. And I understand the temptation to believe in the purely self-made myth, because a perfect meritocracy feels a lot more motivating because it's the only factor we have direct control over. But we have to be careful about equating wealth with boundless competence and capability, and honestly, vice versa. And that's partially why the self-made millionaire myth is a bit of a slippery slope, because it likens wealth to deservingness and it strips success of context. It implies that outcomes are perfect representations of capability and a willingness to work hard, thereby creating a powerful self-loathing cocktail when things don't go according to plan. And that tends to reinforce the way things are already trending. If more power and money and opportunity flow to those who already have power, money, and opportunity, the advantages compound. More importantly, the momentum of disadvantages becomes more difficult to stop, because there's an assumption that if you're not traditionally successful, it's because you must not deserve to be. This myth has dicey implications and is ultimately unfounded. There's no empirically rigorous way to validate how many millionaires are truly self-made without further defining what's meant by self-made. So at the very least, the claim deserves skepticism overall. Regardless, the data around who is a millionaire in the US is telling. It is actually comically difficult to get a straight answer. Most sources, again, just include circular references to one another without any one source clearly citing their original data set, likely because there's no official source. Unlike data around income that can be obtained from official tax documents, you don't have to report your net worth to the IRS. So in its stead, small sample size self-report survey data that ask, hey, are you self-made? Often metastasize around the web. That said, depending on the source, it appears approximately 90% of global millionaires are male, which to me is one of the clearest indications that self-made is a myth. If only because half the population of the world is female, it stands to reason that if only the hardest hustling people became millionaires, your global millionaire count would be closer to representative of half and half. The most important takeaway is to be particularly conscious of whether we are internalizing these narratives around what it takes to be successful. The truth about headlines like the 8 ways rich people see the world differently than poor people is that they suffer from the classic chicken or egg mix-up. They attribute generating wealth to certain characteristics, when in fact, these are merely attributes of someone who is already rich. Number 2 on one of these lists. Rich people believe starting a business is the fastest way to make money, while the average person believes starting a business is risky. Well, yeah, Who's able to more easily take on risk? Someone who's already wealthy or otherwise has a solid safety net, or someone who's feeding a family on a paycheck to paycheck income? Being able to take risks without seriously jeopardizing other aspects or people in your life is a privilege that's not afforded to many, and the survivorship bias inherent to the success stories obscures the reality of how disastrous outcomes can be if a business isn't successful. And we can't forget number 6 on the list. Rich people believe money is earned through thinking, while the average person believes money is earned through time and labor. Well, yeah, you can't quit your job and sit on the couch and think your way to your rent payment. What would happen if doctors and construction workers and farmers and truck drivers heeded this advice and decided sitting around and thinking would be a more lucrative use of their time than laboring? It's great to believe that anything is possible if you work hard. Some degree of naivete is useful in business and in life, but we would be wise to interrogate these socioeconomic, sociocultural tropes around wealth, deservingness, and the idea of being self-made. If nothing else, the word itself, self-made, betrays its most fundamental flaw. It focuses on the self. It ignores the scores of people, communities, and systems that are required for anything of consequence to be built. Recognizing the variety of inputs that are important, like relationships and luck and timing and hard work and perseverance, can help us focus on the true needle movers of financial progress, not just the stereotypical work longer hours and wake up earlier billionaire mindset advice. If you want to hear the full episode of this week's show, click the video that just popped up on the screen and in the description of this video. Our show is a production of Morning Brew and is produced by Henna Velez and me, Katie Gaddy-Tassan. Devin Emery is our chief content officer, and our video editors are Christy Muldoon, Sebastian Vega, and Nicole Friedman. Additional fact-checking comes from Kate Brandt.